Back for another UNLV All Access Podcast. Big week, rivalry week, Cannon week. Caleb Herring has been part of this in the past as a player and now as a broadcaster at Steve Cofield. Game's coming up Saturday, 2 o'clock with the kickoff. Radio with Caleb and Russ. That is ESPN Las Vegas, 100.9 FM and 1100 AM in the Ted Weens pregame show. I don't have to calculate. Now we're back mostly in the Pacific time zone. So 1 o'clock with the 1 hour long Ted Weens UNLV pregame show. And if you want, what I would do, no insult to Matt Neverett, but the game is also being televised, which I don't think has been pushed out a lot. This was finally put together in the last couple of weeks because demand is so high for UNLV football. I will be on Silver State Sports and Entertainment Network, Cox 125 and 5.2 on HD, along with Matt Neverett. So we'll be doing the TV call. But, yeah, go back and forth. Caleb's analysis is second to none. All right, so just give me your general feeling. And we're going to talk about some of your rivalry experience against Nevada, UNR-Reno, the Pack. How fired up do you get this week?
Super fired up. It's like it's one of those like mark it on your calendar before. Like it's like you find when you're looking at the schedule, when the schedule release, you're like, okay, when are they putting the Reno game? Like when is that rivalry happening? There was a while where it was on rivalry week at the end of the year, and that was awesome, obviously. But the October 30th was like a Nevada day or whatever day it falls on the schedule or at whatever point in the season, you always mark it. And you're like, I want to be ready for that one. As an alumni, as a former player, UNLV is starting, I think, to take it more seriously. And there was a time, I think, a stretch where the guys up north and their fan base from a football standpoint were way more into it and way more intense about it. And I think Southern Nevada has finally kind of woken up to it. And the Vegas community and UNLV football in particular is like, no, we want a piece of the action. And it's heated up. And I get excited for it every year because it brings back memories and the videos that have circulated social media about this rivalry and how intense it has gotten in the past. It gets you fired up. In an age where people are screaming that rivalries are dying because of conference realignment and things like that, it's good to know that the in-state rivalry is alive and well. And UNLV is a big deal. It's a huge deal in the Herring household. All blue jeans have been tucked away until the game is over. There's no blue that's allowed. So if you see anybody in blue, let them know. It's not allowed this week.
People at the school take this really seriously. I know before doing TV last year, someone from the school was like, you are not to call them Nevada. That is not going to happen. Kind of gave us instructions on what we could call them. And yeah, the blue is absolutely outlawed. People take it really seriously. And I've always believed as serious as UNLV takes it, UNR-Reno takes it even more seriously. I believe there is genuine hatred from many of the people in Reno when it comes to UNLV, when it comes to Las Vegas. It's one of the rare states that really does have, pardon me, a north-south split. Like philosophically, somewhat politically, although the state is changing, there's a split that way. There's a culture and a lifestyle split. Yep. We really have become the big city with a bunch of transplants while they consider themselves the real battle-born people and the real Nevadans. So we're going to get into that a little more with your experience in the rivalry games and also the fan treatment. But, the looming topic here going into this game, while the Rebels are playing really well, is they have a really good problem. They've got multiple quarterbacks who can play. And we still don't know officially the condition of Doug Brumfield. And I want you to listen to this. And the audience that didn't hear it, I put most of this up on Monday on a video. Odom is playing this pretty coy with what's happening right now with Doug Brumfield and his availability and clearance and who may start.
He's had a good day today, made progress last week, and excited to see how really all three quarterbacks can continue to improve in what we're doing on the field and the retention of, the things that we've changed offensively over the last few weeks, the new things that we put in this last week. And I thought all three have made really good progress. It's good to see from a health standpoint, other than Jure, everybody's pretty healthy.
Do you know who's going to be starting on Saturday?
No, I don't. I'll know, and we will know. After we get through with Thursday's practice, have a better idea on how everybody did this week, the health of each position, and that being one of them, and then make decisions from there after the conclusion of that practice.
Coach, is he fully cleared to play right now? Doug?
There's a lot of questions about is he cleared to play or practice? That's still up in the air, and I think out of respect for him and our program, I think, as I mentioned, Dre's the only one that will be out at this point, and it would be unfair for me to project if I think that who would be cleared for full activity and who wouldn't at this point.
So if Doug is cleared to play, will he be the starter?
It depends on how many snaps he takes this week and if he's able to go through the practice that's needed to play. And that's for every position, not just Doug. If you don't practice at the level that you need to because of health restrictions, then there's no way that you can go play and if really at the level that we need that position to play or any position for that matter.
Caleb?
I commend media members for the job they have to do. At some point, coaches are just going to stop answering those questions. I understand that there's a narrative and a story to be told, but it's like we know kind of what we're going to get from coaches. They're going to play coy. They're going to play the role and dance around the question and not really, for whatever strategic advantage purposes, not give the answer, right? So credit to those asking those questions and kind of getting what we can all say is not the realist answer, and it's the political answer. I don't know how you want to say it, but it's coach talk. There is truth though, and if you could sift through it, you can figure out the truth to some of these things. Where I think we can all agree, listening to coach, that you have a good problem, and he's aware that when Doug is healthy, if he's not 100% cleared at this point, when he is, you do have two quarterbacks that you're comfortable with for sure, that you could say we can play winning football. Like we've seen those two this season.
He said the last 2 weeks, three.
And that is a testament to Cam Friel. I think he's prepared well and understood in backup duty as he's been over the last couple of seasons. He's doing a good job this season. So I think that speaks more to the team than it does to the quarterback situation, because playing winning football does not mean necessarily playing stellar quarterback play. And we've kind of danced with that idea in these past couple of weeks with Jade Mayava, the idea that he hasn't played phenomenal. He's not going out there throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns and lighting it up at quarterback. That has led to the team's success. The team has a winning formula, and I think all the quarterbacks are capable of doing that. So I don't think that's a lie or that's embellishment by Coach Odom when he says that. I think all three can play winning football with the way the team's playing. But I think as long as he can, this will be a question that is basically unanswered until we wait and see. And that's kind of I know in the media, it's hard to just say, we'll wait and see. You have to get the stories out there, build the anticipation. That's what your job is to do. So I get it. But the real truth, the real answer is we're not going to know until Saturday, regardless of what he says to the media or the answer or how many times he's asked in different ways. We won't really know. And we have to accept that we won't know until Saturday when things kick off up in Reno. And that's just the way that this dance goes when you have a situation like the Rebels do, where your quarterback's down, your starter's down, and your backup's playing well. You have the luxury of being able to play kind of both sides of the fence when it comes to the return of your starter.
What did you make of Odom mentioning they've added some new material, some new plays, and play retention?
That's a part of game planning. I think every week in my playing experience, the good teams, and I fortunately was a part of a good offensive team in my senior year, but every week there's some wrinkles. There's some install that builds maybe on something that you've already learned and the fundamental base of the offense. So offensive coordinators have the flexibility as teams grow and mature and understand the offense more thoroughly to make subtle adjustments that, maybe are tendency breakers or little wrinkles that exploit or moves and counter moves within the offensive structure based on how teams have reacted to certain formations, motions, play design, and so on and so forth. You add stuff during the season. If you start the season with the same playbook that you finish with, you might have stalled out somewhere, or you were just perfect to start. I don't know. I've never seen an offense that doesn't evolve, but there's an element of retention that quarterbacks and everybody on offense really have to have week to week, because your playbook looks different based on the opponent that you're playing. Sometimes it's the same play call, but just going against a different defensive scheme, you have to read it differently. You got a team that's running a lot of man-to-man coverage on defense. You're going to have a lot of breaking routes that are snapped off and trying to create separation. Against zone teams, you're going to have to understand pacing and tempo and finding windows. It's just a different way to read different plays and to run different routes against that coverage, and also different ways to block up front. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing that changes. How do you go up against even front teams? How do you adjust to teams that slant a lot on the defensive line? How do you adjust to teams that bring pressures? All these things are subtle nuances that you have to adapt, learn, and retain during the course of a season, because it's never going to be the same week to week. Things that you're going to run, you might have run a lot of outside zone last week, and then this week it's going to be all counters and powers on the inside. So the offense evolves, and you have to retain those evolutions throughout the course of a season. Otherwise, you start to tail off, and it shows on Saturday.
So going into the game against UNR again at 2:00 start, it'll be live on ESPN Las Vegas starting at 1 with the Ted Weens UNLV pregame show. Quarterback is a question right now. The Wolfpack have to prep for 2, if not 3 quarterbacks. There's a lot of questions. They're not going to know everything in the scout, but the other thing they can't really scout with a lot of information is that nickelback position on defense. And Jare Williams, now down for a while, was the number 1 defensive player according to PFF with the guys who have played beyond 100 plays. So the first look that was thrown out there against Hawaii was a combination of J.D. Ladd and some Jonathan Baldwin. I want you to listen here as I think this was Andy Yamashita, who I don't know if he wrote it yet, but clearly is writing some sort of angle on the nickelback and replacing Jare Williams. Listen to Odom as he talks about J.D. Ladd and the position in general.
He's got really good cover skills. I think the more reps he gets at that spot, he'll understanding how important it is in run fits and setting the edge of the defense. There was some rotation opportunities there with both of those guys in the last couple of weeks, but we had trained Jed in so many spots. If you went back and look at what we talked about as a staff when we had meetings last week, we said really we felt like that was probably his best spot. So now, a blessing in disguise a little bit that weeks leading up to that we were already putting in that position anyway for some reps in case there was an opportunity that who was the next guy that could go in and help us, and that's proved to help us out. I think maybe going through real quick roster wise in my mind, I would say Jet probably improved as much or more than anyone last week in the way that he practiced, and now hopefully we'll carry it over to live reps.
That nickel spot is such a versatile position, right? You need him to blitz, you need him to cover. What are you kind of looking for from any player who might play that spot? Well,
just like you mentioned, it is important, and they all are. But structurally, on setting the edge of the defense and run support, there's times that is the primary focal point of a call that we have defensively. There's a lot of times there in man coverage in a receiver. We do pressure a lot, from that position. And then in the zone principles, how you can progress from 2 to 3, the match concepts on how we're playing them. You've got to be able to do a little bit of everything. And then if you get some formations, there's times that he could be, a 50 technique linebacker, and that's a whole nother world of eye discipline and training and some of those things. So it takes reps, it takes time. It sounds easy, hey, go out and play that spot, and by the way, you got to do this, this, and this. But Jets, he's done a nice job, and our coach has done a good job coaching him.
Okay, what do you think of the breakdown of the position first?
I think the nickel position has evolved a lot as far as what they're asked to do. There was a time back, in my playing day and even before, where when you had a nickelback, they were in there specifically for pass coverage and pass heavy downs, and you didn't really trust them to do a lot outside of cover, slot guys or be in the pass defense. But over time, as the speed of the game, I think, has adjusted and offenses have gone to a more pass-heavy systems, the nickelback has become sort of an every down thing. It used to be a third down kind of specialist, but now it's every down. And so you've seen the evolution of that position with guys like Jure and Jet Elad, who are hybrids that can do both. They can be physical against the run, just a third linebacker, or they can be a 50B. However you decide to go after it, you don't have to change your personnel grouping in order to do that. And I think that's a big thing. That's big in the game. And the teams now you see across all levels of football that have a solid guy on the slot is able to take away and do some of the things that a lot of offenses have tried to exploit over the past, which is create mismatches in the interior. With a good nickelback, with size, speed, physicality, and cover skills, you can eliminate some of those mismatches. And you think big picture here, guys like Travis Kelce make a living because they are mismatched in the slot. You can't guard them with a linebacker, too big, too slow. But if you decide to put a lighter guy in there, they'll just run the ball. So you can't do that with a guy like Dre Williams. And now in his place, Jet Elad, who's just as physical, I would say, probably size-wise, maybe even has a little bit of weight on Dre Williams, just if I eyeballed it. But plenty capable of fitting in against the run and being on the field for those run-heavy downs on first and second down. But then has the versatility, like we saw in Hawaii, to be a good guy in coverage. Did a really good job on the back end. And that's what a nickel is supposed to do. They're supposed to be a jack of all trades, essentially, a guy that you can put into a position to make a play. And they more often than not do, as is the case with Jure Williams. So I think the nickel position is very important, especially in this system. When you're talking about a 3-3-5 and the structure of it, obviously there's a lot being asked of everybody as far as covering the field and speed and the demand for physicality at every position. But especially at that nickelback, I think football in general has put a heavy emphasis on that spot. But this system, I think, in the way that Coach Odom has and Coach Shear have implemented it, they also put heavy emphasis on that position. And I want to give credit to the scheme of this because Jet Elad did replace Jure Williams on the roster, on the depth chart. But Coach Shear and the defense did a great job of using everybody on the defense that was available to the best of their ability and making the right calls for the right people in certain situations. Using Jet Eli's in coverage, I think more than they used Jure Williams in coverage, and using Jano's versatility to fill in kind of what a nickel back would do at times. It was a great job of coaching to the best abilities of your players that we saw in Hawaii. And I think that structure and that system of having guys play multiple spots, and Jet Elad was one of those guys along with Xavier Carter on defense who they talked about all offseason, like where would we fit him? Where's the best fit for him? And they put them at different places and challenged them throughout the offseason. And then what do you know? You find your spot. And once you know during the season, you end up getting to take that spot during the game. And both guys I just mentioned, Xavier Carter made a big play in Hawaii, forcing the fumble, and Jet Elad was all over the place in coverage, making tackles. So I think the system has helped a lot in highlighting some of the talents, especially when you talk about nickelbacks.
Big game coming up. As we tape this, UNLV is a 9.5 favorite, actually opened at 7.5. So the money's been on the UNLV side. I think it's less than half dozen times the Rebels since 2008 have been a 3.5 point favorite on the road or bigger. And they haven't done that well in these spots. Right? They haven't been in many of them. They haven't done that well in these spots. And the intensity here, because I know people say this all the time, and it doesn't really mean it every year. Right? Throw out the records. Mm-hmm. But in this series, I feel like whoever is potentially the downtrodden rises up many times and plays a good game. As I mentioned earlier, there is a dichotomy in the state between what we think of Clark County in the south and what we think of in the north. And for a new coaching staff, I found that Odom has played this pretty dry in not providing any trash talk material that Ken Wilson or the Nevada kids or the fans could use. And believe me, they can find anything. They already have this natural, the fans do. And Wilson does too. He's been part of the UNR program forever.
Yeah, I think it means a lot to a number of people. It means a lot to the state, the alumni base on both sides. Coach Hunky Cooper did a great job giving a message to our team this morning. I mean, he's been invested and understands the rivalry maybe as good or better than anybody in our building. So I've spent time researching it and understand. I knew the importance leading up to this week and now even more so after being in it now for a few days.
All right, Hunk with the speech. I wonder how that went.
I'm sure it was very enlightening. It fired up.
Hey, don't forget, for all that we know about Hunky leaving the city and coaching with San Diego State and also playing Arena League football, he is a UNLV guy.
Yeah, through and through. So it's no coincidence. Captain Cooper, as we call him, on the buses leaving. But I'm sure it was fiery. I'm sure it was passionate. I remember learning about the history from over my years, countless speakers. We had every day of the week, we had somebody speak, somebody from the past come in and talk about it and explain the history of it. So we got an understanding of exactly, how UNLV was born and how, that development of the Southern University sort of turned into a bitter hate from the former school that was the only Nevada school. So it's almost like that bitter ex that's like, you know what? We were one at one point. We were together in this, and you betrayed us and you left. You rebelled against us, and now you look at you down there getting all the nice shiny things and living your lavish lifestyle. There's so many different aspects of this that make it, historically, that give it context. And I think those of us that have been around long enough to know about it and live it, appreciate it a little bit differently. Coach Odom, I think, was candid in saying that he wasn't familiar with it. And honestly, why would he be? Outside of taking this job, I don't think most people would be knowledgeable about how serious the rivalry is taken by both universities involved. And, things like the trophy being the biggest trophy, the most expensive trophy in college football, like those kinds of things that are well-known facts to us here that have been a part of it. But to the average football fan, maybe not so much. And I think once you play in it, especially if it gets contentious, which it always has the potential to be, you've been there when it gets a little crazy and hectic on the sidelines. And when you live a rivalry that's really bitter and like really there's some natural hate between the programs, it can get ugly. And I think hopefully that's not the case. I think you always want a clean game, but there's so many stories that make it fun to tell at the end. We just watched this past weekend the Red River rivalry. That's like a tongue twister. I don't like saying it, but we watched that rivalry and how emotional those things get. And this may not be as nationally recognized a rivalry, but it's just as intense for everybody that was ever involved. Rivalry games are fun, and I think Coach Odom and the staff do understand that, and they may be downplaying it intentionally, but once things kick off on Saturday, they'll be just as fired up as the next person.
What's your best and worst moment?
Oh, boy. Worst moment, I think, was my sophomore year playing there up in Reno, and I had the worst game of my career. If you check back and look back on my history, I was, I believe, 1 for 8 passing with an interception, 8 total yards, and we got destroyed. And that was the game, I believe, that may have led to me switching positions for a little bit. My confidence got after that. It was like, really, in the rivalry game, I'm going to play like that? It was a crappy situation through and through. And I was like, what is going on? Doubted if I should even be playing football that bad. So that was probably my worst. And that was when Reno as a football team was riding kind of high. So they definitely made it sting a little more with, the things that were said by players and fans leaving that day. So that was the low. The high, of course, among many highs in my senior year, was going up there and beating them 27-22. I got the game ball still on my wall behind me.
Yeah.
One of the most important ones. Beating them 27-22. That picture above me is actually me celebrating at their stadium. So going to, I think it was the first time in a long time that a UNLV team had gone to Reno to take the trophy back. So we celebrated like crazy that day. That was the highlight for me of that season because it was like the full circle redemption for me, like making up for that terrible loss and then coming and getting the big one on the way to the bowl game. It was huge. It was big. And I think anybody that was there rolling that cannon off the field is one of the best feelings you could ever get. It's cool to defend it, like when it's already red, but turning it from blue to red and wheeling it off the stadium as they look miserable in the stands, that was a highlight for sure.
Action on the field and chippiness and trash talk. Are these games in your memory? Are these games at the top of the list for like the nastiest on the field?
100%. And it wasn't even it. Sometimes it wasn't even what was said. It was just how you said it. Like like the fire and intensity behind the "you sucks." It was like, whoa, you actually meant that. That's not just trash talk. Like, you don't like me, and I don't even know you. Especially when you're on the road, like the fans get in on it. There was a little old lady that we were driving up in the buses coming up to the stadium, and they're kind of tailgating around the stadium as you're pulling into the locker room. And for whatever reason, I just locked eyes with her as we're driving by in the bus. And I'm sure she could see me through the window. They're not that tinted. And I'm just staring at her for whatever. She caught my eye, and she just flips me the bird. And I was like, what? You're 80. Why are you so mad? But everybody's like upset about it and pissed and fired up about it. They don't like the Rebels. They don't like UNLV football, especially. And they let you hear it. On the field, they let you know. And every little thing they can do to try to get under your skin is to the nth degree. It's definitely more intense, but you love it and hate it at the same time.
That's funny that you had an old lady around the bus. Last season up there, Kevin Kruger continued his unbeaten streak against Alford and the Wolfpack. And on the bus, the players are celebrating whatever the post-game food was. Probably should have done broadcaster rights on that one. But there was a young lady outside, and she was the only one there, and she started to lift her shirt. I'm like, oh, we're going to get a flash. And then underneath the shirt was UNLV sucks. and all the guys on the bus and everyone on the bus was like, that is awesome. That is so good. Especially since the Runner Rebels had won the game. I had a chance to talk to Tiger Shanks. That was a good discussion. I got to tell you, man, covering these football teams over, 5 or 6 years, and you see guys when they're young and when they're older, Tiger's grown up. Not that he was, like a dummy or anything and didn't speak well, but you can see there's more confidence now as a player. It was I enjoyed the conversation. So here's a portion where Tiger Shanks, the starting right tackle for UNLV, is talking about the rivalry against UNR.
So this is my third time playing against Reno in my career here. And yeah, it's a gritty rivalry. It really is. I mean, I remember the first time we played them, it was my redshirt freshman year, and we got blown out at their place. So that really left a bad taste in my mouth. Like, it was that, like, really lit a fire for the next year, And even the next year it was still a hard fought game, really gritty game, back and forth to the end. We had our Doug go down early, and a lot of adversity struck. So, I mean, I'm just excited for this next one, next opportunity to go beat Reno.
Well, you guys have won 3 of 5 in the rivalry. You haven't been part of all 5, but often the story is one team is a little bit down and the other team is doing well, and now it's kind of reversed a little bit here. So you talked about staying focused. I mean, this is a massive game for them. They got this long winless streak. I'm sure their coach is feeling it. Again, kind of telling the guys on the team like they could rise up and play their best game of the year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just watching film on their team, they've had a tough schedule the first 5 games. So it's like their record isn't really indicative of how good I think they actually are. Their film is better than what their record says, which I think is a message that we're trying to get across to everyone. Like, you can't take them lightly. This is a huge game for us. Just as much as it is for them, it's a huge game for us. So just keep grinding, keep practicing hard. That's what's been the message, I think, this week.
You agree with them on the thought that the Pack have been a lot better than their record, and they suffered a really rough, kind of embarrassing loss against Idaho, but they've very much been in these last few games against pretty good opponents, including I think a pretty good Texas State team, and taking a 17-0 lead before falling apart in the second half. When you watch the film, you agree that the Pack are a lot better than the record?
I think so. I think it could be the case with a lot of teams actually that have poor records. Hawaii was one of them. I think San Jose State too in conference is another team that you say the same thing about when you cut on the film or you watch, the way they compete. It's like, the record doesn't tell the whole story. And I think the more you watch football, the more you realize that wins and losses do matter and they count, but they're not always the whole truth. And you look at some of the teams that they've lost to, and Kansas is not a schmuck or anybody to shake your head at either on their schedule to lose to 31-24, a one possession game essentially. The Idaho game obviously was a sore spot, and I think anybody would tell you that was one that they didn't play their best. But they've had moments of competition. Even last week against Fresno State, there were times where Fresno was struggling to move the ball and struggling to find a rhythm offensively, and they were able to cause some chaos. And I think figuring things out offensively for them, as it is with a lot of young teams, as far as developing and meshing together, offense usually takes a little bit longer to come along than the defense does. And I think that has been one of their woes, and figuring out the quarterback situation and how that's going to shake out with Lewis being kind of the leader to start things. But you saw some of the younger guys getting some chances as well. But I think they are better. And they, especially in a rivalry game, you could throw the records out of the window. The emotions sometimes take over, and people play out of their minds for whatever reason in these rivalry games. So I don't think the record is indicative of how good or dangerous this opponent could be. It's good that the Hawaii game preceded it, because I think it was the same kind of messaging for UNLV, where it's like, hey, yeah, their record's down a little bit. They haven't won as much as maybe people would anticipate them winning, but they're still dangerous. They're still a threat. And you saw at times during that game against Hawaii where it's like the rivalry and the emotions and the fans and how that kind of impacted the level of play on the field. The same can be true here in Reno. So you have to, as a player, say, I don't care what the record is. They're the best team we're playing this week, and they're the only team we're playing this week. So we got to give them our best shot. Otherwise, they got the potential to hurt you. Just like, they got scholarship guys just like we do. So at the end of the day, that's how you have to look at it. You gotta have that nameless, faceless opponent mentality and attack the day just like you would any other opponent.
So Tiger Shanks has been part of the rivalry, as he mentioned. Jackson Woodard has not, but all football players have been part of rivalry. So that's where I started this part of the Woodard portion of the press conference, as we got into rivalries and also trash talk.
Jackson, what's the best rivalry you've been part of, college, high school?
This one seems pretty serious. I had one in high school that was big. It was a cross-town rival. They're about a mile from us, and that was pretty big. But I'm expecting this one to be the biggest. Everyone takes it really serious. In the locker room, guys are telling me what it's going to be like, and I'm really excited to play and, do everything we can to win.
How much trash talk was there in the last two games?
Regular, nothing crazy, but it's just part of the game. So, but I normally don't hear too much of it and don't give too much of it. So, yeah. How
do you make sure guys stay in check when it starts to heat up, and maybe the seatbelt thing might not be the best move right now?
Yeah, well, you want to play with emotion. That's what this game is. You want to have fun, and so do all of that. Without getting the penalty is what I would say. Because when you make a play, celebrate it. You work so hard every day, all week, to go make that play. And once you make that play, go celebrate, but celebrate with your teammates. And that's what Coach Odom tells us a lot of the time. You can celebrate, but do it with your teammates. And most of the time, if you do celebrate with your teammates, you aren't going to get that penalty. And then when it comes to people talking, let them talk. Let your what you do on the field, your play, do the talking. And, so that's what I say to the guys. But, yeah.
I'm glad to hear that bite again, because I was thinking afterwards, I'm like, was I a jerk for asking about, or basically telling a player, put away the seatbelt? For folks who don't know, some UNLV players will do, I don't even know what the seatbelt means, but after a play, they'll put on the seatbelt. Officials watch pretty closely in this game, and a lot of stuff does happen on the field. Obviously, there was the brawl in 2019. I'm trying to know so then after that, Shanks mentioned, was that 2021 when they got handled pretty badly, but they did have some goal line stands. And I remember one of the seminal moments of that game was Brennan Scott, who was a true freshman, coming out of a goal line stand, is like all busted up, and he flipped out. And they threw a flag on him, and I remember you upstairs like, wait, he wasn't the only one involved. How did he get his face all busted up?
Yeah, and those are the things that happen in rivalry games, and that was one of those things. Like, wait a minute, he's getting punished for this. He literally got his face mask ripped off and was like defending himself essentially. Obviously, the second guy always gets caught, and that's something you have to be aware of. Obviously, as a player, it's not fair, but it's the way it goes. The seatbelt thing is like a DB thing. Like, it's like if you lock down somebody and covers, the seatbelt is like putting you in lock, strapping you in because you're locked down. So that's kind of a swag thing that's taken over. But
what happened at UTEP with Cam Oliver, right?
You get the penalties. You get if you do it too much, if you get too excessive with it, and at that jawing with it and talking with it as well.
You can't stand over your opponent. Just run somewhere else. And like Fred Tompkins did it in another game, the Vandy game. Just get away from the opposition. Do it at your sideline.
And I always thought the best celebrations anyway, the most fun that I had celebrating was with the team anyway. I like those kind of things never really did it for me. And I think once you think about it, and most players, and I know Cam for sure was one of those guys, when you think about it, it's like, I didn't need to do that. Why did I do that? Yep. It's not my best moment. It's a mistake. But this game, those mistakes get costly, especially on the road when the chippiness is to the nth degree. It's like, okay, be aware of those things because they will try to use it against you. And the officials, like you said, are a little bit more sensitive to those kinds of plays because they do understand the potential. And just like Coach Odom and his staff are getting their briefings and getting, educated up on the history, you better believe the officials do too. They get brushed up on the history of knowing that they're going into a rivalry game. It was mayhem in 2019 up there. And we were there, and it wasn't the brightest moment, but the emotions ran wild. And, as an official, it's part of your job to make sure that doesn't happen. So early flags for that kind of stuff are definitely in the cards for both teams. So as a player like Jackson Woodard, you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware that that's kind of the way that these things are going to be officiated. So keeping your emotions in check and aimed in the right direction and playing with your pads is what I think he wanted to say, and let your pads do the talking. That's kind of the motto that I've heard spoken by coaches. Whenever teams start talking smack, let your pads talk.
Last 5 minutes, we're going to make a pick here in just a second. I think one of the keys to the game is going to be how the Rebels defend Brendan Lewis, who if he gets the edge or gets run lanes, he can do a lot of damage. He's a big kid. He's got really good speed. He can turn the corner. Now, on the other side, you've got a team in UNLV that is feeling really good on defense about sacks and tackles for losses. But what that means is you have to be disciplined. I want you to talk about discipline in a second, but we're going to have Jackson Woodard from the press conference talk about why there's been so much success with double-digit sacks in the last 2 games combined. Same for TFLs.
What do you, for Jackson, what do you see out there that's led to the rise in sacks and tackles for losses?
Yeah, I think that comes with, just experience, 3 games, a little bit you're feeling it out. And then once you start getting that confidence and start rolling, you saw our D-line was just playing with the fire under them. Every play they were going to get that quarterback and nothing was going to stop them. And we obviously have emphasized that in practice. Practice, what you do in practice is going to be what you do in the game. And so playing like that in practice has definitely helped.
It definitely helps. And I think the swagger on defense is one of the biggest things that you can have because I always make a point of this is that I didn't like when defenses moved, like pre-snap movement and like not even like shifts or things like that, but just like the ability to play loose and like kind of just move around free roam so you couldn't get a beat on what they were doing. Though you start to see those things with a defense that's confident in what they're doing. I think we've seen that from UNLV. Whether it's timing up their blitzes right, bouncing around at the line of scrimmage, getting offensive linemen on edge, those things play a part in how you can beat the blocks. And I think the UNLV defensive front has done a good job of that, along with scheming up some good blitzes, some stunts. We've talked about some of the unconventional lineups that they've had at the line of scrimmage that have helped out in that regard as well. But the fire and intensity comes from confidence. And I think defense is 95% confident. And that, if you look back in the history of great defensive players, none of them were quiet. None of them were, nervous or shy about going out there and playing football. And going back to, Ray Lewis and J.J. Watt and Ed Reed and all these boisterous voices. And then, of course, you talk about guys like Deion Sanders, who is still one of the most confident human beings on the face of the earth. That is an absolute intangible quality of a good defensive player and a good defensive team. Coach Shearer said, during the fall camp that the good defense is you can close your eyes and know what's going on. And part of that is because they're making noise, making checks, but also because it gets loud and physical when they're playing confident and flying around at a high speed. You can kind of feel the ground shaking around you as that unit moves as one. Playing confident and playing fast is, I think, been key to what UNLV has done to turn around the pressures and the explosive plays that they've generated this year.
But when you're aggressive and you're on the outside, you better set the edge, because I'm telling you, especially in that game against Kansas, when Lewis got the edge and he turned the corner, that's trouble. Have to play disciplined.
And it's tough because you want to get after the quarterback and you want to rush. And especially coming off of a 6-sack game, you want to continue that trend. You want to get more sacks and you see the benefits of it. But there are quarterbacks that you face that exploit those kind of pressures. You have to have good gap discipline, lane discipline, edge discipline while you're creating pressure situations. And in that sense, you slow down your rush. It's almost like a team that has a good screen game. Like if you pin your ears back too often and run, they exploit that. Well, when you have a quarterback that's savvy with the run, and fast, quick, hard to tackle on the edges, when you have that, you as a pass rusher are less likely to go rush. And as a defensive coordinator, you're less likely to play man coverages behind any pressures because if he avoids that sack, there's nobody with eyes on the quarterback. And you see it time and time again where quarterbacks scramble for big chunks of yards that are explosive plays. And essentially they come at the worst time because you won the rep. If the quarterback's taking off running and scrambling, you've done your job for at least the first 5 seconds of the snap, right? Where everybody's covered downfield. You got him out of the pocket. He's on the move. It's like, okay, usually that's a win. But with a guy like Lewis, he gets in that situation and it turned into a 15, 20-yard chunk play. That's frustrating. That is backbreaking for defenses sometimes. And you have to be alert to that. As hungry as you want to be for sacks, you have to maintain discipline and keep the quarterbacks in check, especially when they're a threat with their legs.
Prediction time. Well, I'm going to mention something very important before predictions. They switched the sidelines for home and away teams. Yeah. So now the Wolfpack are on the side with the small set of stands. The opposition is in front of the press box and the big set of stands. What I read was that Ken Wilson wanted to make sure that no one from the press box was looking down on their play calling, spying. So whatever. But what that does mean is in addition to the lunatics who are in the end zone, which is where the brouhaha really heated up in 2019, now you've got a lot more Wolfpack fans right behind you, right near the field, within earshot of the players. So, again, there's going to be a lot of hooting and hollering. I think it might affect the Rebels in the first half, and I could actually see the Rebels trailing in this game going to halftime. I do think they win. I do not think it'll be in double digits. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to put up, the 40 points per game they've been putting up recently. So I'm going to go with a pretty tight one. Pisano gets a bunch of field goals, and they win 26-20.
Tight one. I'm going to kind of go the opposite here. So we'll have a good conversation next week. But I'm going to go the opposite. I think from what I've seen from this coaching staff, from what I've seen from this team, I think the bye week cleans up a lot of things that have held them back from executing early and really blowing a lot of these games open earlier than they ended up blowing them open. I think they start fast. I think they're healthy. I think the offensive line comes out and does what they've been doing at closer to full strength. Don't know for sure if it technically is 100% strength with Jalen St. John and guys getting back to the rotation. But I think they assert their dominance early in this game. I think with some of the turmoil that's going on with Reno, a lot of distractions may take away from their production on the field. All the outside noise and all the fire and the rivalry will still be there, I think. But I think between the lines, I think there's a lot of chaos going on for the team. And being winless at this point in the season, I think this is when, especially during the bye week, when the voices start to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff and say, like, who's staying, who's committed, who's locked in mentally still. I think this is an opportunity for UNLV to come out fast and kind of throw a haymaker that knocks them down for the count. So I say Rebels somewhere in the ballpark of 38-17. That would be my prediction.